Hey guys, happy Friday, happy weekend, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, then please do me a favour, hit that subscribe button. Today is part 3 of my conversation with NFL draft expert Jack Brentnall, talking about the top prospects in this year's NFL draft. Kind of got Jack's kind of top 5 guys this year. Really interesting stuff. Couple surprises maybe in there. This isn't his top 5 mock draft. This is just his top 5 best players in the draft. Really interesting stuff. Really good insight into some of these top guys. Of course, with the Browns having the number 2 pick, one of these guys are most likely in play for them. So great insight on these guys from Jack. As I said, this is part 3 of that conversation. You can check out the 2 previous videos I did with Jack on the positional strengths and weaknesses in this year's NFL draft, as well as a conversation about the quarterbacks as well. I will be releasing the full interview with Jack some point over this weekend as well. You can catch all the conversations kind of uninterrupted, and we also covered some other stuff as well. The NFL draft as a whole this year, is it a weak draft? Some Senior Bowl stuff, as well as Jack's thoughts on what the Browns should do with the number 2 pick as well. So loads of good stuff in there. That will be released this weekend. You can see where you can follow Jack and his work for the Touchdown NFL in the links in the description. So make sure you go and check his work out. But for now, part 3 of my conversation with NFL draft expert Jack Brentnall on the top prospects in this year's draft. In regards to the ton of top prospects then in this draft, what guys do you view kind of as the top of the crop this year? Let's maybe say 1 to 5, given that the Browns have a top 5 pick. Who would you say those guys are?
So this is obviously just based off kind of prospect grading in terms of how good these guys are, not necessarily where I draft them.
Yep.
But my top ranked prospect is Travis Hunter, who is the wide receiver and cornerback from Colorado. I think that if people aren't already familiar with Hunter's game, I think that kind of tells you everything you need to know about why he's so special. Two-way player in an era that we don't get two-way players anymore. He won the Heisman Trophy as the best player in college football this year. Finished with over 1,200 yards and 15 touchdowns as a receiver. On defense, he's got 4 picks, 7 pass breakups. He's a legitimate first-round talent at 2 positions.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever seen. I don't know if we've ever seen that before. Certainly, in my lifetime, there's been a couple of guys who've played both sides, but nobody who's been this good.
Yeah.
At both sides. He's elite athlete, really intelligent. I think the football intelligence stands out. That kind of background playing both positions really kind of serves him well, both in terms of as a receiver, how he attacks coverage and how he attacks DBs, but also on defense in terms of how he reads routes, how he feels coverage. He's probably the best kind of zone coverage defender I've scouted. And he has incredible hands that play really well through contact, even though he's 185 pounds. So obviously not the perfect prospect. You'd like him to be a little bit bigger than that, but I think he's as close to a slam dunk prospect as you've got in this class for me.
Yeah. So do you think, just quickly on Travis before you get onto the other, some of your other guys, do you see him as a better wide receiver or cornerback?
So I feel like I've kind of ummed and ahed over this one. For me, he's graded out better at corner.
Yeah.
I think he is a rarer talent at corner, and I think that much I'm kind of confident saying. Whether I would want him at corner or receiver in the NFL, part of me's leaning more towards receiver. And that might sound strange, but I think it's partly because cornerback is such a volatile position year to year. You just have to look at how much cornerbacks get paid versus maybe wide receiver or edge to see kind of how that plays out. It's very rare to see a guy be kind of top cornerback year after year after year. With the way the league's going, maybe having him as a receiver is where I'd lean, but I'm kind of just draft him and play him where you need him. If you've got a hole at cornerback, put him there. If you've got a hole at receiver, put him there, and you'll be fine.
You see, for me as a Browns fan, of course, cornerback is arguably one of our least most important needs right now. But through this whole process, I think I've been in the camp of viewing him more as a corner. But I think what you say about kind of where the lead is going, where of course the money is going to influence what he wants to do as well.
Sure.
I think I'm kind of just in the same boat as you in terms of just draft him and work it out essentially. Whether you play him on offense and maybe have a few sub packages on defense, or the other way round, I think he's, as you said, I think he's a slam dunk, regardless of who picks him for what position. But any other guys that you kind of see at the top of this draft?
So another defensive guy for me. Actually, I'll kind of spoil a little bit of my top five. 4 out of the 5 are defensive guys, if we count
Wow.
Hunter as a defensive guy.
Yep.
Is Mason Graham, the defensive tackle from Michigan. So, and again, this is one of those things where I think defensive tackle maybe isn't the most sexy position, so it maybe doesn't get as much kind of hype and love from fans. But this is a 2-time All-American. He was also a freshman All-American in his first season with Michigan. Really great combo of size, burst, fluidity. He's used up and down the line at Michigan. Obviously, they've got Wink Martindale there as the defensive coordinator, or did have in last year, and he kind of used Graham all over the place, and he won kind of comfortably from a range of alignments. He's also a really good run defender. He anchors really well. He can withstand double teams. So you've got a guy who can be a 3-down difference maker. His hand usage is great, and he can kind of, he can win in different ways. He can go through you. He can go round you. He's not the longest rusher, so like there is going to be a length question, and I'm interested to see how he kind of comes in at the combine and what he measures in at. But the talent is there, and he just feels like a guy you could put there on Sundays already, and he's just going to be a very, very safe prospect with pass rush upside. And I think, again, you look at the teams that are in the Super Bowl. You've got Philly and you've got Kansas City. Both of them have a really disruptive interior defensive lineman in terms of pass rush.
Yeah.
Having that, I think, is really important in the modern NFL, and Graham gives you that.
Yeah. Yeah, Graham is one of my top 3 prospects. I'm an Ohio State fan. It does pay me to, call a Michigan guy one of the best prospects in this draft. But as you said, kind of to have that good of a run stuffer, but with the upside potential as a pass rusher is so important in the NFL. As you said, the defensive tackle position doesn't kind of get the media kind of coverage that maybe the edge rushers do, or maybe some of the other sexier positions, but it's one of the most important positions on that defensive line. As you just alluded to, you look at Chris Jones and what Jalen Carter are doing. If you can get a similar player to either of those two, I think that's definitely worth one of the top picks in the draft. What's your thoughts on Abdul Carter?
He is on my list.
Yep.
So we can go to him. He'd probably be 4th on my top 5 at the moment. Not
Cool.
necessarily, like I say, this is not ranking in terms of where I'd take them, just in
Yep.
terms of how I've got them graded. Obviously, this is edge from Penn State, former off-ball linebacker, transition to edge this year. I don't know if I've ever seen a guy change position and look this much at home, like so quickly. He was straight away an impact player at edge. Now, you'll hear a lot of Micah Parsons comps, and I think that's partly because they both play for Penn State, partly because they're both elite athletes, and to be honest, because they both wear number 11. But like there is something to that. I think Carter's got the high-level athletic traits you need to win as an edge in the NFL. He's really fluid. You can see that kind of off-ball linebacker background, I think, when he kind of bends or if he's crossing the face of the offensive tackle. They'll drop him into coverage occasionally, and he's like obviously very comfortable with that because he's got that background already. His wide range of pass rush moves is what really stood out to me, though. Like, you think, okay, you've converted to edge this season, you're expecting it to maybe be more of a kind of pure athlete just trying to win with traits rather than, finesse, rather than technique, rather. But he's actually quite a good technician. And he's got a physical play style. He doesn't always play, he's not always the strongest, and I think you'd hope he adds a little bit more kind of sand in his pants to stop the run. There's
Yeah.
definitely room to develop as a run defender. He plays a little bit narrow. He can get kind of knocked off the ball a bit. But to be honest, like if it's your first season playing edge and with your hand in the dirt, like that's fine. You can work around that. He'll get stronger when he's in the league. I think there's just not many guys who move like that and can rush the passer like that. So yeah, surefire kind of top end of the first round pick for me.
Yeah, he's been my favourite prospect, kind of in my dive from this. Obviously, before the Miles Garrett trade request came out, it was still, the guy that I was leaning towards if he was there at number 2, purely just because of the excitement of pairing him with a Miles Garrett. As you said, I just think he's so explosive. He's so quick off the line. He's one of the best athletes in this draft, regardless of position, in my opinion. And of course, this year as a full-time edge was just incredible, really. 12 sacks, 24 tackles for loss, which I believe led all players in the FBS this year, and is a number that not even Miles Garrett or either of the Bosa brothers managed to get in college. So for me, he's kind of been the guy I've had my eyes set on from the start. But of course, with the Miles Garrett news, maybe that it just increases even more the need for me. So that's kind of why I was interested on how you view Carter. I think Daniel Jeremiah's got him as his number 1 prospect. I think a couple guys have. So interesting to see you have him at 4. Did you say so? Who did you have at 3?
So who I have at 3, and this is going to come with a very large caveat,
Yeah.
is Ashton Genty, the running
Yep.
back from Boise State. Now,
Yep.
I'm not taking this guy at number 3.
Yeah.
I'm probably not taking him top 10 just because running back value. But like as a player, if you're just grading them in terms of how well they play their position, like Genty is absolutely outrageously talented. He is such a fun watch. He looks like if you ever kind of go back and watch some of these top guys playing high school football and they just
Yeah.
kind of run over guys and they just bounce off tackles.
Yeah.
There are times when you're watching Ashton Genty and it's kind of like you're watching some guy in high school, just who's just better than everybody else. And yes, he's at Boise State, and yes, he wasn't always playing top level competition, but when he did play top level competition, he looked good.
Yeah.
Just go and watch the game he had against Oregon this year. He was like absolutely unstoppable. He reminds me a lot of Alvin Kamara. Now, Alvin Kamara people get comped to Alvin Kamara a lot, and I think it's often overused, but he actually does. Like they have the similar kind of build, but he's also got that outrageous kind of contact balance that Kamara has. The stat that really sticks out for me is he had 151 rather missed tackles last year. So for context, the next most since this stat's been tracked over the last decade is Bijan Robinson with 104. The gap between Genty at 1 and Bijan at 2 is as big as Bijan and the guy at 153.
Wow.
Like it's now he did have a ton of carries, but regardless, like that's still just insane. He's got great vision. He's got really good lateral agility and athleticism, and he can handle a heavy workload. I can't remember how many carries he ended up with, but I think he led the FBS.
Yeah.
I think it was well over 300 carries this year. So there is going to be a bit of concern about kind of tread on the tyres. He's had more than 800 touches in the last 3 years, so it's quite a lot of work at the college level. And he does have a fumbling issue. Like it's hard to find holes in Genty's game. I think he's had like 10 fumbles over the last 2 or 3 years. I can't remember if it's 2 or 3, but he's had quite a lot of fumbles.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can't teach guys what he has, and he is up there with the kind of Bijan level prospects as far as I'm concerned in terms of running backs. Now, how high you take him is going to be the big conversation, because he's a running back, right? And
Yeah.
But on pure talent, you've got to shout out Genty as one of the best in the class.
Yeah. I've seen some concerns about size, which I don't quite understand. I mean, I know he's a little bit maybe on the height side, but I think he's 210 pounds at least. Is there any weight to that at all, or do you think?
I don't I don't get it. I don't really see it. Yeah, he's short, but there's plenty. I think he's 5'9", but there's plenty of precedent of those smaller guys. Like for me, if you're short, short is fine as long
Yeah,
as you've got the kind of play strength, and he definitely does. Now, don't get me wrong, he's not necessarily the hammer you're going to use all the time in short yardage.
yeah,
He can do it, but like he's more than big enough. Like there's plenty of guys that size. You look at like Kamara, Aaron Jones. They're kind of
yep.
similar size, and those guys have carved out really good NFL careers. So I'm comfortable. I don't think a guy needs to. Running backs don't all need to be Derrick Henry size to be.
Is that? I think that's the issue, isn't it? Is that everyone
Yeah,
looks at Derrick Henry and thinks and kind of forgets that that is a unicorn.
yeah,
But
exactly.
but
Yeah,
Derrick Henry's another player as well that had a lot of carries in high school and college and in the NFL as well, and it hasn't seemed to slow him down up until
yeah,
this point. I think that was the biggest knock that I saw on social media about Ginchi is everyone was, oh well, yeah, of course he's going to run for that many yards when he's got that many carries, and you think it's 7 yards a carry. I don't
yeah.
care how many carries it is when you're knocking out consistently 7 yards a carry. I don't care if you ran the ball 1,000 times that year. That is very
Yeah.
impressive for me.
And actually, to be honest, in a way, maintaining that efficiency at that volume is even more impressive. Like averaging 7 yards a carry, if you're getting kind of 10 carries a game, that's that's
Yeah,
fine. But when you're getting this workload, and defenses are stacking the box, like Boise State's offense was Ashton Genty.
yeah,
Like defenses were doing everything they could. They had like one job, and they
yeah.
couldn't stop him. So like it's yeah, one of the craziest seasons I've ever seen.
I mean, again, not to, but back to Derrick Henry. He was getting all of those carries, but that he was at Alabama. They had those players on the outside as well that they had to account for. Um, yeah, I think it was a lot of kind of just people trying to not make as much out of it as they could. But it was an historic season from Ashton Ginchi and something that should definitely improve his draft stock, even though he is a running back. Would love to see him go top 12 and get a pretty decent rookie contract in terms of money to start his career because he's definitely deserved it based on what he's done at college up until this point. So who's your fifth guy to round off your top five?
So this might be a little more rogue. I don't know how many top fives he'll be in. He's certainly probably a consensus first rounder, but it's Georgia safety Malachi Starks. Um, Now, again, it's kind of like the Genty conversation. I'm not taking a safety top five,
Yeah,
but as a player, I think he's phenomenal. You look at him; he is really excellent athlete. He's got that kind of when you're looking at safety, or at least for me, when I'm scouting safeties, there's a few things I'm kind of really keen to see. It's the kind of transitional athletic ability. You've got to be playing on the back end. You've got to have those smooth hips. You've got to be able to turn and run, and you've got to be smart and be able to read plays from deep. The further you get from the ball to be able to read plays and react quickly is really important because a mistake at safety, if you read it wrong, that's like a 40-yard touchdown potentially. Um, he has both of those things. He is an incredible athlete. He reads the game really well, whether that's run or pass. He's got a great feel for zone coverage. I also think he's a really good man cover guy. Like Georgia moved him around, which, you know, if you're being the guy who's been moved around Georgia's defense, they're clearly trying to put you in great positions because they know you're the guy, right? And he started at Georgia since his true freshman season.
yeah.
Now, we've seen so many good players come out of that Georgia team, certainly on defense. So if you're starting as a true freshman, that says a lot. Um, he plays in the slot. He can man up against slot receivers. And I like this safety class, but there's not a lot of guys in that class that I'd be like, yep, I'll put you in the slot versus, a proper slot receiver, not a
Yeah,
tight end or a flexed out back.
yeah,
He can do it. He's a good run defender. He's a good tackler. Now, the knock on him is going to be size and strength. He's, average size-wise and average strength, which, you know, but, by NFL standards, he's not going to wow anyone. He's not like another guy who I really like, which is South Carolina safety Nicky Menwari, who's
yeah,
like 6'4", 220. He's not that size, but like he's good enough. He's not really been used as a blitzer, right? But I mean, like, if these are the cons that you're finding with a safety, like he doesn't blitz a lot
yeah.
and his size is average, you're kind of like, okay, this guy's pretty good.
Yeah, it feels like you're kind of scraping the barrel to try and find anything to criticize him at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He's a really great. But like I say, I'll be really interested to see where his kind of value comes in, because I think safeties in the first round have a very mixed success rate, certainly. Um, but I think just on a talent perspective,
yeah,
I think he's great.
yeah. I think since Jamal Adams went in the top eight or whatever it was a few years ago, I think people are a little bit scared about drafting these safeties. You look at Carl Hamilton falling to 14 a few years ago,
Mm.
annoyingly to my AFC North rivals, the Ravens. Quite an interesting top five you've got there. One that I think is maybe not quite with the grain of all of the the kind of generic kind of media what they've kind of said. Obviously putting Jinchi in there purely as obviously the talent, not based on where you think they're going to go. This wasn't your top five mock draft prediction. This is just your top five players.
Yeah.
So rounded off the top five again quickly for me, just to refresh.
Yeah, so number one, Travis Hunter. Number two, Mason Graham. Number three, Ashton Genty. Number four, Abdul Carter. And number five, Malachi Starks.
Awesome. So